think you have a couple minutes here for everybody to filter in.
Yeah, welcome in everyone as you guys show up. Uh, this is the Hackle box, normally with Oscar, myself, Eric, and Pink over there. Oscar will not be joining us today because he decided that he's worthy of some kind of vacation or something along those lines. I don't know. Thinks he works hard and he needs a break. So we'll be sitting here, working like we do. Pink.
Yeah, I call shenanigans.
Me too. Do you ever take vacation? I mean, like, I don't take a lot of vacation. I'll be honest. Like, if you ask me, like, my kind of idea of a good vacation, like, there's this part of me that's ingrained to just be like, I don't know, somewhere close to Wi-Fi so I can still be working. But what's your idea of a good vacation, man?
Yeah, I mean, a good vacation actually is pretty unplugged. I like to go away if I can. That said, I'm just as happy just hanging out at the house for like just a week. Go play video games, watch movies, whatever. Pick up a TV show and binge watch, that kind of thing, just to recharge. But yeah.
I feel like if I don't leave my house, it's not enough. I can't do I mean, I can do staycations. Staycations are great to some extent, but it's like how getting 4 hours of sleep is enough, but eventually you're gonna have to get some more. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and so
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, so staycations will work, but eventually I find that I have to leave my house, and it doesn't even take that much. I mean, honestly, every once in a while, because I live in a tourist town of some kind, and so every once in a while, I'll just go stay in a hotel, like one of the casinos nearby,
Sure.
and just stay one night in a hotel. But realistically, I honestly like just be out in the woods is what I like. So either camping, or sometimes what we'll do is up at Lake Tahoe, we'll do like an Airbnb and just get a house in, like, on the mountain somewhere, or in the woods somewhere, and just kind of just be in a different house, but be out in the woods, be able to go for a hike or something like that if we want to, or something with trees and stuff nearby,
Sure.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I live in the woods, so it's a little different,
yeah.
There's national parks and forests and stuff around, so I can kind of go do that stuff a little more. So I do tend to try to, if I'm gonna unplug and get out, I want to go tropical, right? I want to go to a beach at a minimum, that kind of thing. So shifts
Coastal.
yeah,
I
exactly.
get it.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's exactly the inner Viking, like we were talking about.
The inner Viking, yeah.
Day.
we're Pinky and I were talking the other day about how both of us have this inner Viking in us that has to we yearn to be near the coast. I've lived on the west coast of the United States for all my life. I'm currently in Nevada, which is too far inward. I feel landlocked. It's just so far away from the ocean, which it's not. But yeah, and so we were discussing that a little bit. But
yeah.
Anyway, I think we've gotten several people to join now. Probably go ahead and get started, I imagine. Yeah, so obviously in the news since the last time, we do this every month. The exchange is still an ongoing thing, right, Pink? I know, Pinky's doing the IRs over there, and then we're still dealing with a lot of that, I believe. I think we're closing up several, but I think it's still an ongoing thing that's going to be ongoing for a bit.
Yep.
What have you been seeing over there?
Yeah, so it is starting to slow down a whole lot. At this point, honestly, if you've kind of not patched and you've not worked through this, you're probably compromised. So, if you've not gone through that patch process, you definitely want to do that very soon and do some threat hunting and that kind of thing. But it does seem to be slowing down a whole lot. We are wrapping up, I think, almost all of our cases involving exchange at this point. So, not a great deal of actual exploitation. We saw a lot of hits, those initial attacks, and but most keep that in mind, most didn't go any farther. So really good overall for us and our clients, but still kind of a dangerous situation if you've not patched.
Yeah, this seems like this. I mean, just the type of attack it was. It seems like it was just being, and we talked about this before, but just shotgunned out there, right? So almost everyone got hit with it, but maybe even after the initial hit, it didn't really go further necessarily because there was just so many hits, right? They were just kind of picking their targets, I guess.
Yeah, and you could see that too, and that it was a lot of it was heavily scripted because you would see, trying to attach to an administrator mailbox in exchange, and honestly, those don't exist in probably, I would say, half or less of of the environment. So, just a shotgun approach exactly is a great way to put that. So, which
Right.
we talked about this a little bit too, but the potential ransomware that came along with this, someone kind of thrown together. And I know you were looking into that a little bit, but the Deercry.
Yeah.
So I know you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it was just that Sophos had an article that they had found a new ransomware variant called Deercry. They noted in their article that it seemed like a beginner had created it. It seemed pretty basic, didn't have much going on. They noted some similarities to the original WannaCry, but other than that, it seemed kind of almost entirely unnoteworthy. I think people just POCs came out and they were throwing stuff out there, right?
Sure, yeah. But I mean, it could have been anything, right? You could have leveraged this attack to do all kinds of things. It's just kind of odd that there was a one specific ransomware variant like that that tried to get attached to this. And I agree. I mean, sure, you don't want it, but I don't think it was quite the explosion that they were worried about.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree there. Have you even seen Deercry in any of your?
No, not at all. Yeah, we were. I mean, I don't want to say panicked about it. We were on high alert as soon as we heard, "Hey, there's ransomware coming with this," because that's always the fear. We joke around a lot about it, but every attack now is ransomware. It seems like there's some data exfil and things like that, but almost to the point of I don't want to say being bored with it at all, because they're all different and it's rough.
Right.
But there's that's the attack of the day, right? Is ransomware. So we figured it was coming. We were a little concerned about it. And then when we saw there was a new variant that added some extra mix to that, because it's something new to look for, right? We don't have IOCs for it, that kind of thing. And but no, we didn't see it anywhere. So that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't want to beat on to Exchange too much. We obviously talked about it last time. I'm sure people have heard about it a lot. We'll move into some other, news and stuff that's going on out there. First thing, the Facebook breach. 533 million or so, account details leaked. I believe it was just name, which you're going to be able to potentially get anyway, right? Name, mobile phone number, gender, and Facebook ID. What do you think about that? Does that worry you?
Not really. I had some initial thoughts on you could do some stuff here with this, and maybe I don't remember the exact stats on this, but there's something to the effect of if you have a gender, a name, and a zip code, right, you can really pinpoint down most people pretty quickly with that. But even still, in this scenario, I think probably worst case we're looking at is maybe spoofing a number. Like if you call Verizon or something like that, and they automatically assume you are the number you're calling from, that kind of thing. But I think this one again is probably in the news more because it's Facebook, right? It's everyone uses it. It's out there, and such a huge number too. But I think overall, it's not that damaging.
Yeah, I mean, I never want to say, look, it's 533 million, records breach. So it's hard to just say, well, it's not that big of a deal. But I mean, at the same time, it's like the data that got leaked. It's data that like you're going to be able to find doing OSINT on most people if you want to, right? I think that potentially there's the issue of just like, well, so much of it just there to collect and mess with, right? To try to just, well, I already have it. I don't have to do any recon, so we can start from a place there. And like you said, there's types of vishing, third-party vishing, right? Like calling up and having a little bit of information sometimes can go a long way. We've seen it plenty of times in the past. Not so much as, maybe not someone has had it happen to them, but it's something that's been proven out many times by social engineers out there that having a little bit of information about someone can be enough to continually target third parties and get more information. So obviously, there's those types of concerns and stuff like that. But
yeah, and I mean, I don't want to brag on Facebook too much. I'm sure they do plenty of things that are awful, but having this type of information get leaked, whereas it wasn't something more sensitive, I guess, is almost a plus in their case, I guess, in a weird way. But
sure.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't like saying that it's no big deal, because it is a thing, right? There's an issue there, but I'm just not sure if this were some other service, right? I'm not sure we would be all that concerned about it. It's just that it's in top of mind, that Facebook icon's on every phone in the country. So
right. Yeah, if the number was lower, if the name was different.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Other things in the news. Apparently TrickBot is making news again. Look, I think people seem to believe that there was a shutdown, and think that this was a shutdown and kind of gone away. But I think anybody maybe who's been dealing with it, such as yourself, would kind of say, no, that's not the case, maybe.
Yeah, and we made the joke, and for folks involved in meme culture, we'll call it, right. It's trick bots back, and just it always has been kind of thing. And I don't think it ever really went away fully. Microsoft back late last year did have a situation where they, or an operation where they took down 120 out of the 128 known command and control servers that were involved with trick bots. So huge, big deal. We were all really excited about it because um, you know, realistically, last year, I would say the huge majority of the incidents we worked involved TrickBot. It was there somewhere. It's particularly nasty. It's polymorphic, meaning that it can change itself enough to switch its hash around, that kind of thing. So hash-based detection, traditional antivirus doesn't usually catch it. If it does catch it, you're probably in trouble because it means that it's been out there long enough for a hash to have gotten seen by Virus Total or Microsoft or somebody picking that up. Um, so that's always a little bit scary. It's honestly it's kind of a neat piece of malware. I know you and I were talking about this a little bit beforehand. It's modular, so you could attach a VNC server to that to allow for remote access. You can throw Mimikatz in there to do credential harvesting. But just to kind of take a step back on the attack pattern here too, and Eric, I'll kind of lean on you here in just a second about this too. But thinking through how these attacks were working with TrickBot, it was all almost always. I don't say always because it's you want to be that absolute, but usually we would see a delivery of Emotet first. So Emotet's an old banking Trojan. It's been around a long time. Also pretty nasty. Moves and changes and it's polymorphic as well. We would usually see Emotet come in. The attackers in that instance would then usually use Emotet as a delivery mechanism for TrickBot to get those extra features, the modular capabilities and that kind of thing. And then TrickBot self spreads throughout the network and that kind of thing. And then that's when you get into more of the actual attack. Whatever they're going to do. Ransomware, almost always it was really paired a lot with Ryuk ransomware. Over the last couple of years. So it was a big deal to see it. And knowing that I had those command and control servers out there was a big deal. And I know, like, I mean, Eric, kind of talk through that a little bit, right? Microsoft takes down those command and control servers. What does that really gain us here?
Yeah, sometimes we'll see takedowns out there. It's like, well, they were using these domains and all of the variants of it were using this domain. And so we got ownership of it and we shut it down and that doesn't work anymore, type of thing, right? But in the case where you're just saying, well, we shut down the C2 servers, I mean, C2 infrastructure is generally meant to be very portable. I mean, just be able to stand it up whenever you want, right? I mean, I stand up a new C2 server every week, at least 1 to 4 every week, right? So hearing that they got shut down is great. It's good for this short term, but obviously if that's all that happened, C2 servers can just be popped back up. That can continue to go. It's not something that's going to unfortunately stop it from being there. And I think when we see a big win like that, though, 94% or whatever it was of them going down, we tend to celebrate maybe a little early. Interestingly, too, the article that we had been looking at, I think was linked in the notes for this, was a threat post article, and they kind of talk about it like, well, now that Emotets, they've done a big thing against that, the people are pivoting, back to TrickBot. But as Pink was just saying, it was never really a one or the other situation. It was typically one led to another. So it was interesting.
Yeah, and honestly, we're likely to see the same thing with Emotet. That takedown that's happening now is it's I think it was Interpol or Europol, or it was a bunch of different international organizations, and they're essentially they did take control of the botnet, took control of the software essentially, and they're sending out an update package that uninstalls Emotet. So kind of a neat way to handle it. Actually, probably way more effective than taking down the C2 servers,
Right.
honestly. But likely just going to change tactics and be right back out there soon, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we talked about that last month as well, right? Like the delay and the uninstalling and all that stuff. But we won't dig back into that too much. But it is a neat way, at least, of going about it. I do like the style of it.
Yeah.
And then on the note of TrickBot, you were talking about how it's modular, it's polymorphic. I think we're going to start seeing more of that. There's plenty of just security researcher tools for doing pen testing and stuff like that. C2 frameworks for that purpose that are displaying some of those functionalities. I won't get into too many of them or anything like that to draw attention to them, but there are other ones that are doing that. And I know that a lot of different security teams at different companies are kind of creating their own implants with that in mind as well, going for modularity. That way it's always changing, right? It's not ever the same signature necessarily. You're not getting parts of it, stung, essentially, like you're not going to get it caught before you need it, right? So in the past, a lot of payloads have been things that will have all of the functionality you might want in there just in case you need it. And so it's really easy to signature that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now people started, catching that, obviously. And so now it's like, well, we're not going to include anything we don't want to include. We don't absolutely need. That way it doesn't get signatured. It can live longer. It can go undetected longer, potentially. And then by jumbling up and having different modules, the overall signature is constantly changing as well. And we're even seeing some things that will pull out, reach out and grab a piece it needs while it's running a memory, load it into memory, use it, and then unload itself out of memory and then be gone. And so if you don't happen to catch it when it's going, you might not see it at all. So
yeah, that's a really good point too. And I mean, so funny enough, with TrickBot in an attack that we worked, we saw it kind of doing that. It was reaching out to grab. I think in this instance, it was actually reaching out to grab a third piece called QuackBot. It's another one that gets involved in that attack chain a lot of times as well. So that's kind of neat that's becoming more of even a pen test type capability and that type of thing as well. And I'm never an advocate of spending money just to spend money or going out and trying to buy security. I mean, obviously that's kind of one of the things we talk against a lot here is, don't go try to buy security. In the instance of hash-based antivirus and that kind of thing, I think you're going to increasingly see it become fairly, I don't want to say useless, but less useful, right? And that's kind of tough because advanced CDRs and your heuristics based antivirus and that kind of thing, they typically come with a bigger price tag. So it's an unfortunate development, but it is just kind of the way this is working. And I know working attacks, we will sometimes find duplicate hashes across different attacks, but it's usually for something like Mimikatz, right? It's a commonly used credential harvesting tool. It's not a specific piece of, a Trojan or worm, something like that. So I do think that's going to continue to be an issue, and like you're saying, more tools to make that even easier. So, I mean, how hard is it to pop in and change a couple lines in your code so that it recompiles with a different hash,
right. Yeah, very easy too. I was going to bring that up myself. A lot of times when we're pen testing, we're using a lot of tools. There's always the side of things as a penetration tester. You get it's more and more becoming difficult for us to hide our things because we're using the same tools. We're using tools such as Cobalt Strike, which is a penetration testing type platform, right? It's a test platform. It's not meant to be used by a real attacker, but obviously they can get their hands on it. They can, and we're seeing it plenty lately. And because of that, so can all the security companies, all the EDR development and stuff like that. They can all take a look and get their hands on these things, and they can dissect them over and over again and find different heuristics, different little things, combinations of API calls that they make in a certain order or something like that. And even then, signature breaking might not get past some of these checks, right? And so one of the things as an attacker we deal with a lot as a pen tester, attacker during a pen test, is that people will be like, well, we're catching your stuff. We're catching this, we're catching that. And it's like, well, yeah, because we're using a tool that everybody has, obviously. And we can do our best to kind of get past it, but they become more and more, dissected every day, right? But the thing is that a lot of these other things, when we talk about these, with their names, Emotet and TrickBot and whatever, those are all new things, right? Those are things that people haven't got their hands on to detect. And so as they get more tricky,
I was going to say, I keep offering you the malware that we get out of these so that you can use it, but there's that whole ethical thing of not wanting to infect the customer.
Don't want to install these things on customers. Yeah,
exactly.
Now my favorite thing to get out of the IRs is the scripts. If you find scripts, how'd they do that? Because then I can dissect it. Right?
We found some pretty cool scripts. We found some amazingly basic scripts too, right? Like sometimes we'll pop something open and like, okay, what's this PowerShell script going to do? And it's like 3 lines of code that creates a scheduled task and runs a batch file somewhere else. Yeah. Oh, okay, that wasn't that advanced.
My favorite is because they're trying to do so much obfuscation with their PowerShell scripts these days to get past AMSI and stuff like that. That sometimes the IR team will come to me to help me help them dissect something, and they're like, you will look at it at first and it looks like a decent chunk of code, and then you start dissecting it and kind of following the loops and going back through and resolving it back down to another statement, simplifying it, and then all of a sudden you realize there's like 3 lines of code there.
Yeah.
It was 150 lines to do 3 lines of code, just because of how obfuscated it is. But that's just part of the landscape.
Yeah. And honestly, it works, right? So the fact that we have to bring those things to you sometimes, it slows us down in our response, and or even if it's not bringing it to you, just even the fact of if one of our guys is looking at it and needs to start dissecting that code, that's time we're not spending, stopping things, right? So
lead time.
Yeah, absolutely. And we always tell people too in incidents, it is really difficult to wrap your head around this, but that initial phase of identification where we're trying to find all the tools and the pieces and disassemble those scripts and that kind of thing, that's generally our biggest chunk of time in an incident. And people always want to get to the part where we're stopping the attacker, but it's, we can't stop it if we don't know that it's there, kind of thing. And so that's,
well, it doesn't help to stop it either if you're not stopping all of it.
Exactly right. You leave, we find Cobalt Strike, or we find TrickBot, but we didn't find the Cobalt Strike that they dropped through TrickBot to get back in later, that kind of thing. Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you jump ahead, if you say, well, we found this, we're going to shut it down. Obviously if it's an intelligent attacker, they now know that their cover's blown and they can start taking evasive maneuvers, if you will, right? They can start trying to get onto other systems, do other types of things, deploy a different type of malware, or maybe immediately go through for the ransomware, something that they hadn't deployed yet.
Yeah, it makes me think of our attack and defend the other night, right? You were attacking a WordPress while I was trying to dig into the Apache config and see what I could do, right? We were about to have this very fun back and forth before our time expired, but yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it would have been fun. Yeah, so I think we drilled into that enough. We actually got pretty off the topic, but we have plenty of time to do that, so it was fine. But one of the things we did want to talk about too is just like kind of breaking news, if you will. Something that just got reported on was a Zoom 0 day, and here we are using Zoom, and that's an unpatched one for that matter. So what happened? Every year the Pwn to Own contest kind of gets together. This year they were taking a look at softwares that are used for work from home, especially with the pandemic situation, everybody having transitioned to work from home at this point, taking a look at the things that are kind of part of our everyday life in that environment, and looking for vulnerabilities in those, looking at Microsoft Teams, looking at Zoom, looking at Exchange, looking at all kinds of things like that. And there were 2 Dutch researchers that had found an ODE in Zoom that allowed for essentially a remote command execution. The example they showed in their thing was just kind of running a calculator, because that's the typical, if we get an RCE, we run calculator. If we get cross-site scripting, we run an alert one. We're very simple-minded people. But it apparently was 3 combined vulnerabilities that kind of got them there. And which says to me that it's decently complicated, which says to me that they probably were sitting on this for a bit and waiting for this specific event to get the payday. They were paid, I believe it was $200,000. So it was quite the payday. Very worthwhile for them. So while it seems to only be, Zoom and these couple people who maybe are aware of this right now, or at least these 2 people who brought it to Zoom during this event, and there's no POCs out there, and it's currently working to be patched. It is not, though. But we don't know the details. So the assumption is that you're probably safe, but we don't know how long they were also sitting on that. If someone else maybe somewhere along the line has, done something, found something similar or the same thing and maybe has it. So obviously something you want to be careful of. But I believe, nonetheless, it has to be people on a call. So don't let hackers on your call, please.
I'm watching my task manager right now to see if calculator is going to spin up right now. I'm just kidding. But
everybody be careful.
Yeah,
no, we believe at this point in time that it's probably very, very limited, but obviously something to keep an eye on and know more about. I know I kind of talked through that whole one, but do you have anything to add, Pink?
No, really just that. Unfortunately, we're going to continue to see this type of thing, right? As we move more work from home, there's more tools being involved, and you as an attacker, even a legitimate attacker, right? The more services, the more things running on a system, the more opportunities you have to attack something, right? So I think it's going to, that's a thing that's going to continue here a little bit, but no, just be careful. Obviously set your your passwords on your Zooms. Don't be having unauthenticated Zoom calls if you can help that and that kind of thing to limit a little bit of that until it gets patched. And always be aware that's just a good practice. So.
Yeah. Another thing big in the news is some Google security controversy. You want to kind of walk us into this one?
Yeah, well, I did want to ask, did you want to dig into any of the other things that came out of the Pwn-to-Own?
Oh yeah, totally did.
Yep.
I did forgot to do that. So the Pwn-to-Own, like I said, is contest taking a look at a lot of different applications. There's plenty of some pretty neat things that are out there. Definitely recommend look into it on your own. We didn't want to sit there and just spout off everything that happened at that. A couple noteworthy things is that Exchange back in the news, maybe someone was able to use a combined authentication bypass and a local privask to do a takeover of an Exchange server. Again, seemed to be local. Just from that phrasing alone, authentication bypass of the local privask made me feel like it was proxy logon again. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact detail of it, but obviously it's going to be something else because they made a decent chunk of money off this themselves. And then there was a integer overflow in Windows 10 that allowed to escalate from regular user to system privileges. So just, we run into those occasionally, overflows or different types of things for privask locally. Again, local things, but still good findings. Just one more thing to make the stuff we use secure, but definitely recommend, just looking up the Pwn-to-Own, the number 2 Pwn-to-Own contest and seeing what happened at it this time. Because like I said, some interesting stuff there.
So really quick too, I know Exchange is always going to grab the headlines, big things like that, but like that there, right? You've got a privilege escalation technique on a Windows 10 box, right? Yeah. So the thing is, we generally secure our servers pretty well in modern times. I mean, not always, obviously, but most people have more advanced controls on their servers. They're in a segregated VLAN. They've got better administrator credentials. They're not running a bunch of nonsense on them and that kind of thing. And oftentimes we forget that really a lot of these attacks, the initial foothold is on a workstation, right? So, pretty much everything we see outside of things like SolarWinds, Exchange, and the Netscaler one early last year, it's going to start on a workstation. It's going to be an infected file or something that gets compromised in that local machine, and then somebody like Eric, except the bad version of Eric, comes along and starts working through that and needs to escalate those privileges, right? So, we're always telling people don't have local admin on your workstations, things like that, right? Well, these are a bypass technique for that. Even, we put that control in place and it bypasses that, and you're, you obviously more steps to get the goods, but it's eliminates one possible control there. So always keep that in mind. Workstations are generally a good spot to get started for an attacker. So
yeah, that brings up a really good point. And I do feel like we could spend a couple more minutes talking about that. Sure. Is that local privask is obviously requires you to be local, requires you to get on that machine and to have a footprint on there, a foothold on there. And so it's sometimes really easy for people to go, well, it's not as big of a deal, and sure, technically it's not as big of a deal as if it was a remote, from outside. But it is one of those things where it is still a big deal because, everybody at a company right now, when's the last time someone clicked on something in an email they shouldn't have? Somebody. Even if it didn't result in something bad, probably happened. You probably could think of the date or at least the week or month of it, right? Recently that it's something that happened. Someone did something they shouldn't have done. And, it's all about those types of securities in place, not having a local admin, not having, any software that's out of date that can be taken advantage of or misconfigured services or whatever it is, so that these things can be kind of stopped in their tracks, hopefully. So when we talk about, well, it wasn't remote, so it's not as big of a deal. Well, remote has a chance of getting inside through all kinds of means, right? Phishing is one of them, obviously, but other types of exploits, and where they land and then being able to do these types of things is important. So definitely take those things seriously. I've had so many people try to convince me that it wasn't serious. And I'm just like, well, you can tell me that all day, but we used it to then take over the rest of your domain. So, yeah.
Yeah. All it takes is, I don't see all it takes, but you look at like the Exchange thing, right? That Exchange thing was a nice way in from the outside to then make some other, local vulnerabilities available. Maybe not directly on a workstation, but that's exactly an example of that, right? And even more simple, right, is just the like you're saying, phishing and that kind of thing, and somebody clicking on something they shouldn't have clicked on. And that's usually how it happens. Honestly, it's not, I always joke around. It's not the Mr. Robot stuff that we see on TV and that kind of thing. Often it's much simpler than that a lot of times. Not to discredit your work. I'm just saying,
No, absolutely. I mean, Mr. Robot is by far the most accurate representation of hacking ever in media, but nonetheless.
Are you telling me the little flip down screen for to cruise the Gibson was not all that accurate? I mean, that's
100% accurate too.
Oh, okay, all right,
but everything else is not.
Gotcha.
No, it's true. I mean, like the shows that even try to take it seriously. I mean, now we're just tangenting, but that's fine. The Mr. Robot type stuff, right? They like to focus on the social engineering aspect, which is totally realistic. It can be done, but a lot of times it's just something stupid.
Absolutely. I'm gonna answer one question live here that came about before we switch topics, and it was if you have to have a beard to work here. It is not required, and I am in no way able to speak for human resources, though it might be encouraged.
I didn't see that question. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so as I said before, and then we decided to stay back a little bit, the Google security stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. We definitely derailed there a little bit. So, if any of you guys have worked with Eric and I, we tend to do this. We'll have a 30-minute meeting that turns into 2 hours because we'll wander off on some topic. It's just kind of what we do.
And Dad, who is what we call Oscar. Dad's not here to stop us, so we're going to do what we do.
Yeah. Normally he's our regulator there to keep us in line, but not here today. So hey, this is what happens. But it's what you get for taking a vacation. But yeah, so the Google security controversy, as we have it listed on our show notes. So Google, for those of you who don't know, they have a couple of research arms. One called Project Zero goes out, looks for vulnerabilities, specifically looks for 0-day vulnerabilities. They were heavily involved in the NetScaler find early last year, early 2020, or late 2019, early 2020. And then they have a separate arm called the sorry, Eric, is it the threat
analysis group?
Threat analysis group, yeah. And so those are two separate arms. And so in this particular instance, what happened was Project India or Project Zero, they have an Indian arm. That's why I was thinking of that. But Project Zero found 11 0-day vulnerabilities being exploited across a wide range of products. It was iOS devices, Apple devices, Mac, Windows, Android phones, Chrome, I think was involved. And they were using watering hole attacks is what they were seeing, right? So had a specific spot that these devices, when they went there, that was when they got it, hit with this. At least that was the ones I reviewed. There could have been others. And so what really, this isn't abnormal, right? They find these types of things. They don't normally do attribution. So they don't generally try to figure out who's responsible for these attacks and that kind of thing. The threat analysis group, however, does look for attribution. And in this particular case, they shut down those vulnerabilities, and you may be able to speak a little more to that, Eric. I can't remember if they actually cover that in the article or not, but they shut down these attacks and then published some research about what they had seen and what they had shut down. And that's really where the controversy comes in. I don't know if you want to pick it up there, Eric, and kind of talk through why it was controversial.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, so the argument can be made. Okay, so Project Zero releases some information about what they found, and general research information, lacking, I guess, some pretty big details that normally would be there. And then it's found out by MIT, I think, research group, or MIT something, some research by MIT, showing that this ends up being a friendly Western government. And so it starts to then say, well, did they leave out these gaps because they knew it was a counterterrorism, Western government doing counterterrorism? And so did they leave it out because they knew it was a counterterrorism operation? If they were aware of it, why did they release this at all? A lot of people are kind of criticizing for, right? Generally, it's not. There's plenty of belief that if it's related to counterterrorism or government, those types of things, that it should not be put out there, at least not yet, right? It should be kind of just hidden. And so the fact that this was out there, but missing some stuff, missing some information, and there's belief, and Project Zero's kind of response is, well, we don't do any kind of figuring out who it is, whatever, right? The fact is that threat analysis group does, and so this belief that they did know what it was, they released it anyway, and they're just kind of getting criticized, and there's back and forth about whether or not the information should have been released or not, and whether or not they knew that it was a friendly government doing counterterrorism operations or not, yada yada yada. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, we talked about this a fair bit before the show because it's a tricky subject, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of feathers to be ruffled in this scenario on all sides of this issue, and those sides are many.
Yeah.
It's a tough call to make. For me personally, and this is just me and how I look at these types of things. I would be a little less worried about them disclosing the vulnerabilities, shutting that kind of thing down, right? If your operation gets shut down because somebody found it, okay. I mean, I get that it's a hindrance, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
But I do understand a little bit about them getting their feathers ruffled by disclosing details that maybe pointed out that this was a counterterrorism operation by Western government. That said, though, it's still tough for me to really pick a side on this. I guess is the kind of the way to go about it.
Yeah, I mean, you can make arguments. I think either way. I think you can make
Mhm.
arguments that information out there, especially if it doesn't necessarily put any of the operations at risk. I think what happened here. I mean, I obviously don't know. I'm just guessing. Or kind of just interpreting. I think what happened here is that it got shut down. They started reporting data. They started, um, determining that actually, this looks like it's something maybe we don't want to report all the information on, and so they
Mhm.
held back some stuff. MIT then follows up, discovers what it's about, right? um, you know you can argue that information is always useful. Having information out there, especially information that doesn't harm the actual active operation, is going to be a good thing to have out there. Then the other thing is just like, hey, maybe we just don't anyway, just in case. Maybe you are harming the operation. You don't know. I don't have a side on this, as I could see the argument on either side, but nonetheless, it's kind of out there, and it begs a lot of questions. It kind of brings up a lot of stuff that we're going to kind of move into a little further in our next couple topics. But that is just the general idea of, do you come forward with information or hide it? I think in general, right, is kind of a big question a lot of times in security. Sometimes you have outside forces that kind of tell you to go one way or another, and sometimes you just kind of make a decision, and sometimes you regret that decision. So, you know,
Yep.
Google obviously made, or their Project Zero and their threat analysis group, and made certain decisions. Whether or not they're the right ones or not, I don't know. But kind of digging into the next topic of and let us know how you feel about it. I'm curious to know in general how other people feel about it. But yeah, our next topic is Ubiquity breach that happened. Specifically, we talk about that breach a little bit more, but kind of also the fact that it came out via a whistleblower. This was not something that came out voluntarily from the company, and so it's an interesting situation again, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, but kind of wanting to hide some information potentially. So Ubiquity, IoT provider, right? Cameras and various other types of devices. They had a password that was saved in a LastPass that an attacker got into, and it basically gave the attacker root access to uh, all of their AWS accounts, including all their S3 buckets, databases, database credentials. It gave them the ability to falsify or fake single sign-on cookies and stuff like that. Like basically, just gave them the keys to the kingdom when it comes to the web infrastructure for Ubiquity. And it turns out it was a couple months long. At the end of the year, ended at about in January sometime, and a whistleblower came out and brought it to light, and just last week. So it's been under wraps now for a few months now. What do you think about this, Pink?
Yeah, and kind of like you alluded to there, right? We're digging into this a little bit on a few topics here, but um, if this is tough, and I know we're going to go a little more in depth in a minute, but from an incident response team perspective, and then I also just realized we didn't do, because Dad's not here. We did do our normal introductions, right? So I'm on the incident response team here, so handling defensive operations and helping clean up after attacks and that kind of thing. And Eric, if you want to kind of give your view of yourself there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm the offensive security or services manager and team lead at the moment, and just oversee the pen testing team here at FRSecure, the red team, and our methodology and as such. Kind of have the opposite view in a lot of ways, with a different angle as Pink here. So
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. It's the attack and defend here. So from an incident response perspective, we see a lot of this. I mean, honestly, it's a tough situation. So anytime you're victim of for an attack, from an attack, it's tough. I mean, eh, you don't really want to say that it's nobody's fault, but I mean, attackers have a lot of time to find ways to get you. So when you're the victim of this attack, there's a lot of reputational damage, a lot of things like that. I mean, financial damage, lots of things that can be a problem, right? And a lot of people, a lot of companies, just in general, the knee jerk reaction is to keep that under wraps. Let's not advertise this. Honestly, most incident response plans will say keep communications at a minimum, internal only. You don't need to know. Don't let everybody in the company know about it because it'll get out. That kind of thing. And there's a lot around that. So um, I do for this one. It bothers me because the Ubiquity devices are almost entirely consumer based, right? These are at home products for most people, small companies, at home products, people who could really be hurt on a pretty serious level with this kind of thing. So I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I don't like it. A whistleblower had to come out and say this. But I mean, I understand there are business reasons for it. So, from an ethical standpoint, I hate it, but I get it as well. So,
yeah, I
yeah.
think if you're a user and consumer, or a business that uses these products, I'd be pretty upset. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's that someone had access to our stuff, and you're trying to hide it, right? You're not letting people know about it. I think I feel about that way about most. I mean, every breach that goes hidden, right? I
Yeah.
think that if you're just ask me and take me out of the security context, I feel like if someone's data was available, was out there, it shouldn't have to be leaked for you to tell me about it. You should let us know. It should be disclosure. You should be responsible about this whole thing, and but unfortunately, the reality is that a lot of times the recommendation, especially from a legal point of view, is going to be to not, right?
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And I agree. I mean, it's, things like this, right? Now they're saying, hey, go change your passwords, that kind of thing, right? But what about a few months ago? What about in late December, early January? Did we need to change our passwords then? How long have we been exposed here? That kind of
Right.
thing. And so, yeah, it's a tough spot, but you really need to be. For me, I'm gonna take that better, right? If a company says, "Hey, we were breached, need you to go change your password. Here's what happened." You don't even have to give me the details. Just say something happened, wasn't good. Please change your password. We're letting you know as quickly as we can. I'm gonna be a lot more likely to stick with that company because I mean, and maybe that's just because of our perspective on this kind of thing. We know what happens, but I'm going to be more likely to just be like, oh, okay, well, cool. At least they got to it quickly. I'll keep an eye on things for a bit, but thanks, appreciate it. So,
Yes, it's definitely a balance of reputation damage, right?
hmm
It's we'll take a little bit more reputation damage if it does come out than with or at the hope that maybe it just doesn't ever come out, I guess, right? But
absolutely, yeah,
one other type of thing that's making news is a new ransomware tactic that, well, at least in those scenarios, make this kind of a thing not an option, right?
yeah,
We're seeing some ransomware attackers, or it's being seen out there by other security researchers, that there's attackers that are now emailing customers, clients of compromised companies, and letting them know, hey, we compromised your third party or whatever that you do business with, or your vendor or whatever, and we've gained access to their stuff, to put pressure on the companies to pay the ransom.
yeah, yeah. And this is new, but not right. I mean, it's new in a certain way. So extortion around ransomware has been around for a bit.
Mhm.
And I think we've probably talked about this before, but I almost look at that as a win for us in the security industry. We've gotten people taking better care of their backups, making sure they have offline backups, protected backups, that kind of thing. So they can just tell the the ransomware operator to, pound sand, get out of here. We're just going to restore. Yeah, we're going to take a hit. We're going to be down for a few days while we do it. That's something that's really important for people to understand. It's not instant. Backups don't just magically pop back, especially offline backups. But again, you're not funding more criminal activity. You're not funding the next operation against another company, that kind of thing, if you want to go down that path with it. But otherwise, you're probably saving at least some amount of money doing that. So I think it's a win that we've gotten to that point, but now they're shifting tactics, right? So we're starting to see a lot more, almost every ransomware case now, we're seeing some level of data exfiltration, or at least the possibility of data exfiltration. And I would like for you to talk a little bit about exfil here in a second, because I know you have a really good handle on the difficulties around exfil, and I'd like somebody else to be saying it other than me, because I say it a few times a week. But yeah. So, and now we're looking at an even more sort of an even higher pressure situation, because it's, hey, hello vendor of this, or hello customer of this vendor, your data was found here in this company. That's how I got your email address or whatever. We'd like you to know that we've stolen your data, and the people who had it are not paying us to get us to not do terrible things with that. So
Right.
huge pressure, massive reputational damage possibility with this. So if this catches on and becomes more of an issue, it's going to be interesting to see how the industry handles that. But yeah, your thoughts on that, and then also the exfil. Yeah, I'd be curious to hear.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's interesting. We have seen plenty of different ways of trying to extort that, get more money no matter what, right? It seems to go back and forth. I think at first a lot of people were just backing up or restoring from backups, and then they're trying to find other ways. Well, we'll take the data, then we'll release it to the internet, or we'll sell it on the internet. And then they got even better, and they started just deleting backups so that they didn't have to rely on that so much, right? And then as people started going, well, we can't maybe have backups. We need to have some air gapped backups, or tape backups, or whatever, some other kind of backup, offline backup or something. And so we can restore. Maybe it takes a little longer, maybe we lose a little bit of data, but we can still restore and not have to pay and not have to worry about this. And importantly too, a lot of times, right, not come out and tell people what happened potentially, right? And now we see this will be an interesting one. I think at the end of the day, they're just going to keep trying to come up with ways to make sure that they get their money. So we're gonna see how that works. But yeah, and then as far as it is difficult to, Pink was saying that he probably says it all the time. He talks about exfiltration in general. I know from the IR side, it's a little bit of a different conversation. A lot of times they're tasked with proving if something was exfiltrated or not, which is very difficult. And that's probably what he would like me to kind of speak to some extent too, is that it's very rare that someone has, like when I do a penetration test, or any of my guys do a penetration test, it's very rare that someone sees the exfiltration. In cases where they have, generally they just know that we did based off of throughput. They can say, well, we saw this machine, putting out 10 gigs of data this day, that it normally does, 100 megs or something like that, right? And so they know we know you got 10 gigs of data out. We don't know what it was, right? Not a lot of times in these types of engagements, we are targeting kind of dead data, something not important, just to see if they detect it. Or we'll try to target maybe a SQL server, something that might house sensitive data, but grabbing non-sensitive data that we've identified and we know, and just pulling a large amount of it out to see what happens. And a lot of times they can't even tell us where. They might be able to tell us it came from that server. A lot of times they didn't notice it happened at all. A lot of times people will try to go back and look at it from a perspective of, well, did we see any files? Did you create a big like a zip file of all of our database files or something like that? Like, no, we didn't, because we just streamed it straight on out. We just queried the data and sent it out encrypted over our channels, our C2 channels, and the data got out. I mean, it didn't get packaged up. It didn't get sent as a file. It didn't post to mega upload or something like that. It literally just went out over our C2 channel, if we wanted it to. There's plenty of ways to do it that don't necessarily go that way and are still difficult to determine. The fact is, if you encrypt data and send it one of a million different ways, you're not going to necessarily know what data got out when, or from where, I should say. You'll just know that a large amount of data traversed your devices, and if you happen to be looking at that.
So that's the point, right? The part of it there is you'd have to have that type of logging set up. You're going to have to be monitoring for those big spikes in bandwidth on your firewalls, and a lot of people just aren't doing that. Right. And that's for that tactic. And don't get me wrong, we do have, like you mentioned, things getting uploaded, getting packaged. There are plenty of sort of secret squirrel ways for us to dig into and see if things were packaged, even if they were deleted. There's residue behind. We have some great methods to detect that. But if you're streaming it out through your C2 channel, like Eric's talking about there, we're not going to see that on a forensic analysis. And even with the forensic analysis, if you've got 100 servers in your environment that could have all been, had data or workstations, whatever, or 1,000, whatever, some number more than a handful, the level of forensics we have to go to look at that type of thing is, it's time prohibitive when you're looking at that many machines. So, a lot of times we have to sort of target our look. Okay, this was a high value server. This was an HR server. This one had a lot of intellectual property on it, something like that, and go at it that way. So, and obviously, if you want to go to that level, we can do that, but it may take a very long time to dig through all that data and figure it out. So, things like Eric's talking about there, even, whether they're packaging or not, you know, the monitoring there to look for that increase in bandwidth is a big deal. Now that said, if they're just taking a few files that are really important to you, you're not
Yeah,
going to see that, right?
definitely.
Few meg, yeah, you're not gonna. The plant, the Coca-Cola recipe that they just trucked out the back door, yeah, you're not going to see that PDF or whatever,
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah,
it's important
exfil
to
stuff.
note, yeah, you got to have these logs. You got to have the ability to see that, right? To see this data and be able to track on that data if you want to. And it's important too. It might be a simple idea of, well, we'll just track, what's going outbound, but and that might get you knowing that something went out. But in the scenario where you're kind of ping ponging through the network a little bit, let's say we pull the data off a SQL server, it then hits the receptionist computer that got owned or something like that, and then it goes outbound from hers. Well, you might go, oh, 5 gigs of data left the receptionist. Well, she couldn't have had anything that important, not realize that it was your SQL server.
And
So you
that's
got to
that's
kind
the
of,
path we often see, right? Is
yeah,
exactly that type of thing. So,
you
yeah,
got to
I agree.
track not only the external flow but the internal flow too, to some extent. So
Hmm.
yeah, and then like you said, a PDF is a needle in a haystack. So
Yeah.
which is all I'm hearing is you can't prove that our stuff got lost. Then, Pink, is what you're saying?
Well, and hey, that's a great lead in to kind of what we were going to talk about to tie all these together is exactly that. And look, I have no ill feelings toward insurance agencies or legal teams or anything like that, right? We all have a part to play in all of this, and you're there to keep that business in business so that they can keep employing people and keep doing what they do. That is absolutely a respectable thing to do, and it has to happen. So please don't take this as me, bashing either of those two industries. That's not the case here. That said, there's a lot of legal and sort of insurance through legal type pressures when you're involved in an incident to prove without a doubt that data was exfiltrated, that PDF did leave or didn't leave. Um, so the trouble we run into a lot of times, right, is if they streamed it out through the method Eric was talking about through their C2 channel, that kind of type of thing, you don't have firewall logging to show that level. You don't have packet inspection, or you're not doing, uh, you uh, active PCAPs and that kind of thing that we could dig into and maybe find the data. We're gonna have a hard time proving that data left. So what ends up happening a lot of times is because we don't have a great way to prove that this specific file left or this sensitive data left, then what happens is you'll essentially be asked from a legal perspective to state that, right? We see no evidence of exfiltration. We see no evidence of PHI leaving the environment, protected health information, that type of thing. And so that's where you get into the situations of reporting. And that was kind of what we wanted to talk about a little bit, right? So if generally if exfiltration can't be proven without a doubt, it gets omitted from a report. So when you see these breach notifications come out from organizations, that's because they were able to prove that data was actually taken. There was something there that had to be reported on, and it was provable. A lot of times, it's not as provable, and that's no excuse to turn off your firewall login and things like that, because like we mentioned before, the threat actors are doing things like extortion and that kind of thing. So you're going to get hit, um, but it's a really tricky area that's tough to navigate, and that's why I'm thankful we have lawyers and insurance agencies to lean on to help navigate that. Because like Eric and I were talking about, I think from our perspective, it's like, hey, we should probably just tell people that you got breached and work that out and do the right thing here. And I think that's sort of our title for the segment, was sort of talking about doing the right thing. And
Yeah.
so it's a tough balance to walk. It really is.
Yeah, it really is. I think there's so much that goes into security. And it's, you're constantly trying to kind of do the right thing and trying to, make sure that you're, security in general, right, is a balance of risk. And so it's not necessarily about fixing every problem. It's about determining the ones that are a big enough risk and financially make sense to fix versus don't, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in a simple way, at least. And so we see a lot of difficult conversations, difficult kind of ways to approach things come up, and from the aspect of kind of like doing the right thing, or trying not to kind of just fudge the situation, slightly related, slightly unrelated. We see on the pen testing side plenty of people who want to just get a good report. And I think that's what it comes down to on the IR side too, right? Well, you can't prove it, so we just want a good report. Let's make sure not to get that in there, right? Get the best report we can. A lot of people just want to get the best report they can, and I can understand that. A lot of people's jobs, their pay, whatever it is, all kinds of different things, right, are reliant on getting a good report. Not, and especially if you have people above you, a board or managers, or whatever it is, that don't seem to understand that there's almost always going to be something. There's going to be things that slip by. There's going to be things you didn't know beforehand, something new, whatever. And sometimes it's just going to happen. And so we have this constant conversation internally, I think, as people who are trying to secure things of, hopefully everything I did, hopefully I've secured everything. I want to be secure, but if I'm not, hopefully they don't find it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And being afraid of what might get found. And we see a decent amount on penetration testing attempts in the past. I mean, I'm not trying to say all of our customers, not even remotely close to all of our customers, but occasionally, clients will do something like set up a brand new system, like a laptop with some completely sterile user account that is a member of domain users and doesn't represent any employee that they have, and say, we'll assume breach off of this, and let's do an internal pen test, assume breach style from this section. We've legitimately had people give us hosts that were not part of the domain, or on different network segments entirely, and say, okay, test from here, so they can get a good report. They don't care about security to some extent. They really just care about getting the report to pass up the chain and say we did a good job. And like I said, that's few and far between. But when you see stuff like that, it makes you concerned, right? Because realistically, you want the security of any company, any organization, especially the ones I'm working with, I want them all to be fantastic. I mean, the reason we try to do a good job as attackers, we try to do a good job. I mean, one, yeah, sure, it's fun to win, air quotes, fun to win, but it is it's not a win when you find a flaw, a large flaw in a client's environment, right? And a lot of the times we want to just make sure that gets fixed as soon as possible and as best as possible, right? And so a lot of times, sometimes we ask for a lot of ground in an internal penetration test or something along those lines. We'll ask, to give us a little bit of extra white box, to that or something like that, right? So that we can kind of make sure we get the best test and make sure we can find as many flaws as possible, so you're getting the best bang for your buck, right? And this isn't an advertisement for us, but I'm just saying, if you're ever in a position where you're afraid of the report, embrace it. Try to really understand that we're not your enemy. Any pen test firm that you're working with is not your enemy. Hopefully they're not. And realistically, you want to find all the flaws now, because God forbid you're on the other side dealing with legal and them telling you to cover it up, and having to worry about it getting out there and stuff, instead of just finding it in the first place and having to deal with the bad report in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I say this is one of those things, and I say it, and I know it almost sounds like a joke at this point, but I legitimately mean this, and I don't want to speak for Eric, but knowing Eric, I would bet he thinks the same thing here. I'm happy to work myself out of a job. I want you secure in a way that I don't have to come and do an instant response for you. We'll find something else to do for you. We have plenty of services here, right? I don't want you in that position. It's not fun. It's generally the worst day of your career. And hopefully it's the only worst day of your career. But the fact of the matter is, it happens so often now that sometimes we're coming into these and they're like, yeah, I just came from another company where we had an incident 6 months ago, or whatever. And I don't want that for you. I want Eric to find your flaws. So give him the runway he needs, and that way you can secure it. So the attackers don't find them. So,
all right, I'm sure we could talk on this topic a
sure.
bunch, but I tried to make sure to cut it off right around this time. We're supposed to wrap up. I think we have one question. Do you want to take a look at that, Fink?
Yeah, it was essentially, so I think less of a question, more of a statement a little bit, and it's a really good point from Grant here. Talking about pay or not pay, and there are some scenarios where, kind of like we were talking about with the contacting vendors, contacting your customers, that kind of thing, right? So attackers will sometimes, I personally haven't seen this, but I don't negotiate with attackers very often either. There's specialized companies that handle that for a lot of legal reasons. But essentially getting a false assurance that your data has been destroyed, and even though it hasn't been, and then they turn around and use that data to publicly dox your employee, or whoever else was involved, use that information to get it out there. So even after ransom has been paid. So keep that in mind too, right? Again, leading back into what Eric was saying, let's find the flaws ahead of time, and so that you're not in that situation either. So, but that's a really great point. Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, we're right at that time. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Feel free to keep coming back to these, ask questions as we're going. We didn't leave a lot of room for it, but I think we purposefully were kind of keeping an eye on it and trying to see if we needed to leave room for it, and instead we just ran our mouths. So I hope you guys appreciated that too. Oscar will be back next time, and we'll actually have Dad to rein us in, and we won't go too crazy. But thanks again. The show notes and recording will be sent out after the fact, and I think that's all I got. So have a good one, everyone.
Yep, thank you all very much. Bye.